morning and good evening, depending on the attendees' local time. Welcome, Edin Ibrahimefendić, and thank you for accepting our invitation and for dedicating your time to us in this first international conference on the international law, CONIDIM 2022.
Thank you. It's pleasure and privilege is mine. I'm honored to be invited to attend in this forum.
Okay. Dobro jutro, Edin, and please, could you introduce briefly yourself?
Yes, my name is Edin Ibrahimefendić. I work as a legal advisor in the Human Rights Ombudsman Office of Bosnia and Herzegovina. I finished law faculty some maybe over 20 years ago, and I have published several works on the issues of grassroots activism, surveillance, security clearances, and other. So this would be a short introduction of, let's say, my work and my hobbies.
Okay, thank you. So, and now I will move to some question. And I suppose that you were a child during the Balkan conflict. Could you please tell us a bit about?
Yes, the war is in Balkans are of course the byproduct of the dissolution of former Yugoslavia. For those who might not know, because maybe some of the viewers are born in the 2000 and some much younger, the former Yugoslavia was consisted of 6 republics, and due to its political and economic crisis in the late 80s, and after the fall of the Berlin Wall, Yugoslavia was not only a country consisted of 6 republics, it was, let's say, a social experiment, because socialism was at its core basis. So as all the, let's say, pillars of Yugoslavia collapsed, we had a process of dissolution of the republics. First of all, Slovenia, where the war was very brief for less than 10 days. A longer period of war in the 90 to 91 in Croatia. That was several months of high intensity. Then it was a, let's say, a certain peaceful period until the 1995, and from the 1992 until the end of 1995, there was a very high intensity war that ended up with a genocide that was perpetrated in the late July of 1995, and it was a war in Bosnia. And the last conflict in the Balkans that was perceived as a war was, of course, the war in Kosovo in 1999. And that ended up with a NATO intervention, and later in 2008, the independence of Kosovo. One of the conflicts, but that was very brief, was a, let's say, uprising of in 2001 in Macedonia, now Northern Macedonia, but that was a, let's say, that was not, it never reached that level of violence as to be perceived as a war.
Okay, thank you, Edin. So far, I only know about the safari, the typical one now that we can go to for a pleasure. But lately, I read about Sarajevo Safari. Sorry, please, could you tell us about this? What is Sarajevo Safari?
Yes. First of all, the brief introduction will be about the siege of Sarajevo, how it happened. So after it goes back to this process of dissolution of Yugoslavia. After this breakup of Yugoslavia in Bosnia and Herzegovina, there was a referendum in March of 1992 about independence of Bosnia, and the majority of the people voted for independence, but huge percentage of Serbs in Bosnia didn't vote for independence or actively against it. And with the support of Serbia, there was the beginning of these blockades, barricades, and uprisings. So in April of 1992, with the help of Yugoslav People's Army, who was at that time still present in Bosnia, and that massively joined the Serbs who were in the rebellion. They were able in April 1992 to completely blockade the Sarajevo by taking a certain number of suburbs in the control. So the government forces were able to control the core of the city, several city urban municipalities, but they were not able to control the surrounding areas. And that happened in several other places in the country. One of the enclaves was Bihać, and the three other enclaves in the eastern Bosnia were Goražde, Žepa, and unfortunately one that became the unfamous was Srebrenica, due to the events in 1995. So what happened during the siege of Sarajevo? It was a very strange phenomenon of itself, because the leadership of Bosnian Serbs moved to one of the smaller cities very near Sarajevo, near Pale. And that place was one of the suburbs that was developed during the Olympics of 1984. So one of the things that kind of a phenomenon that happened during that period, that Radovan Karadzic, who was the leader of Bosnian Serbs, was by Bosnian standards a kind of he used to portray himself as a kind of an eccentric person. So he would call the foreign journalists from time to time, and he would recite his poems on the hills that were above the city, where there was this sniper position and the trenches. So on one of these occasions, he was with quite famous or infamous Russian poet, Eduard Limonov. He would from time to time give people machine guns or snipers and said, if you want to shoot on the city, feel free. And from time to time, and it was very, very strange, people would take weapons and shoot randomly or on someone in the city. So it became quite at the time it was a horror for whole civilized world, because that siege as itself was enormously brutal. There's more than around 11,000 people were killed, most of sniper fire or mortar shells, and there were two horrible massacres on the marketplace. One of these Markale, where the one single mortar shell killed 67 people. So during the war, there was this rumor that on the Pale, because they would sometimes call volunteers from Serbia, not only these regular paramilitary units, but generally volunteers that they would come during the weekend, drink, and were given weapons, because the defenders of the city were outnumbered and very poorly equipped with weapons. And they were shoot down on the city. And it was at that time one of the rumors that started circulating in 1993, first of the Italian press and sometimes even in the Bosnian press, was that the people, that there were foreigners, not only as volunteers or people who came fighting, but the people who would come as just for a trophy hunts to shoot on the civilians in the city. And these rumors of a Sarajevo Safari were circulating in the 90s, but there was basically a lot of rumors. Nobody was confirming it. It was covered in the media, and not only in Bosnia, in several other countries. But 3 years ago, there was this documentary, Sarajevo Safari, appeared, where there was a person whose face was, of course, didn't want to reveal his identity, and he said that he was a kind of a fixer for groups of people from Italy who were coming, or from America, to come, and they would fly into the Belgrade, and from Belgrade they would go to enter areas that were controlled by Bosnian Serbs, and they would come to Sarajevo, and then they would shoot on the civilians, and they were paying for these tours. So these were not people who wanted to fight. They were not interested in any kind of a political context or a fight as well. They were not supporting any side, but for them that was basically a thrill or experience as itself. So after all of these newly appeared facts or news, there was a couple of months ago, there was a news that a prosecutor in Milan has opened an investigation in which they were trying to find out who was their people, who was behind that, and all that. And unfortunately, a lot of people who know something are saying that most likely these investigations will not, maybe they will lead to some names or some people, most likely due to all this time that has passed by, and all of these people were very careful not to hide their tracks, hide their identities. So maybe we will never find out, precisely who was that and who is behind it. There were some other individuals whose identities we know, but we are not really sure did they participate in that. So, for example, one Canadian citizen of the Bosnian origin was sentenced a couple of, maybe 20 years ago in Canada, but we don't know if he was participant in that, but he came during the war, joined the forces of Bosnian Serbs, and he was later charged because during the war he abducted some peacekeepers of the UN who were from France, and he was posing in front of the cameras with them. So basically on that circumstance they were able to identify him, and later when he returned to Canada decided to prosecute him and so on. And there was one, but that's not linked to Sarajevo case, of a Swedish citizen who during the war came to Bosnia, and he never basically fought like in an army, but he joined one paramilitary unit in the Herzegovina, in the southern of our country, and he was not a guard. It's very hard to prescribe his role, but he would come from time to time to one of the concentration camp and beat people. So basically, and he was doing that for a year. Then he returned to Sweden, and later he moved to Syria. But later he was apprehended, and I think he's serving a sentence in Sweden. So there is, of course, in this time of the greatest, tragedies and horrible, there are people who unfortunately find pleasure and thrills in beating, torturing another human beings.
Really, I can't find the correct word to express my feeling here in that, Edin. So, however, I'm really curious to know how did this atrocity come to light?
So how would they were? Are they, in a sense, are they prosecuted? In many ways they are. We have one of the during the war in Bosnia, you had these atrocities and the ongoing genocide and some issues that happened, like famous cover of a magazine Time from the concentration camp in Ternopolje, where you had people behind barbed wire, half star, that was happening in Prijedor. It galvanized international public. So one of the issues that came out of it was this forming of the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia that was had by who at that time did a lot in prosecuting those who were mostly those who are accountable for most of the crimes. So even now, the Radovan Karadzic, who was a political leader of the Bosnian Serbs, and Ratko Mladic, who was their military leader, are serving their prison sentences in Hague. Some of the other perpetrators were sentenced to serve their jail sentence. Some of them were left out. Of course, they released after the sentences were expired. And Slobodan Milosevic, who was a president of Serbia, and for many people, he was the most responsible person for the wars in Yugoslavia, not only the one in Bosnia, but the one in Croatia and the one in Kosovo. He died during his trial in Netherlands, in Hague. And one of the other things is, of course, that in many cases and on many occasions, the local, we had a establishment of the special tribunal in Bosnia in 2002. That was one of these so-called hybrid tribunals, because the international community played a very crucial role in 1995 until now in the maintenance of peace and rule of law in Bosnia. So one of the issue in prosecuting all of these crimes was this establishment of these so-called hybrid tribunals, where not only the local judges would serve in those, but the international ones. So we had the formation of this court of Bosnia and Herzegovina, who had for almost 10 years number of judges who were from either Europe, US, many other countries. And there was a similar court, similar composition and similar jurisdiction form, as I remember, in Sierra Leone and Cambodia as well. But the one in Bosnia and Herzegovina was, let's say, the most successful, because the one in Cambodia, due to this time that proceeded, from the Khmer Rouge atrocities until the time that they were brought to the trial, there were more than 40 years. The courts in Bosnia and the system was quite successful, but many issues and still are not yet covered. And even for many, for example, if we speak about the siege of Sarajevo, only the commander of the siege was brought to justice. And many of the occasions there were nobody who was commanders of the sniper units or the mortar shell units were never brought to justice. So due to the inability to find out who they were, or they sometimes were, deliberately, they knew they were destroying all the tracks, all the written materials and so on. But still, in many ways, the war in Bosnia, although many atrocities were never punished, all in all, it is still one of the, compared to many other atrocities and war crimes, it's still one of the crimes, wars that was covered by international local justice, and we have perpetrators that were a huge number of them at least punished. But for many other issues, it still remain a question. From restorative justice, many of the victims were, they never received any compensation for many, and even after all of these years, we had the problems that many war criminals are still cherished, and in many communities they are treated as heroes. So it's not uncommon that even if somebody released from prison, that he would get like a hero welcome in his place. And so we have now the law 4 years ago that prohibits naming of the streets, schools and institutions of on the names of war criminals, because there was a scandal that 10 years ago they wanted to name the student dorm in Pale, where the Karadzic was presiding during the war. They wanted to name it after him, although he's still alive and so on. But that kind of drew huge condemnation and scandal. So it's still a open question. It's never fully resolved, and it still leaves a huge number of open questions. But as one of my friends who is more still into this peace activities, peace building, and who visits regularly places where the atrocities were committed, and who meets victim all the time, and he told me that unfortunately he met some of the people who are from Sudan or Gaza or from West Bank, and who said although you are still you're not satisfied how the things went out, that many issues still remain. We cannot even dream about something like that international community, Security Council will establish tribunal, would go after, would put pressure, put sanction to arrest certain people, that would send international troop to apprehend them. It's still, they say, for them, the Bosnia is like something that they cannot even dream of.
Yeah, it's a truly incredible, Edin. So far, what do we really know about the whole story of this Sarajevo Safari?
We know only few-ish things that we have there are reports that some of these issues are confirmed, but they cannot link them with the specific dates that somebody really shot someone on a certain location, because I'm sitting in Sarajevo in an office, but if somebody is able to, who is watching this, would go to the Google map or something and see the city, you will see the city is basically in the valley. So it's from the whole point, there are mountains around the city and the hilltops. So basically, when you see the higher ground, you have the perfect view on the urban areas in the city. And every day there were, from time to time, there was very intensive sniper fire. So people now, you have this, if you type sniper alley, you will find in Sarajevo, you will find a lot of pictures, photos, video materials of the people who were gunned down, children, elderly, women, civilians, who in their daily life, because you had the shelling during the war, but from time to time you had to go because there was no water, no heating, nothing. So you had to go out to get the food, get water, get wood to heating up your apartment, because there was no gas, no central heating, no electricity. So under these occasions, people were killed. So there are some reports, and so there's some investigation are conducted, but nothing in a sense that some names or specific groups will appear. So and those people who kind of came and were appearing in a sense of anonymity, that were just saying we don't know if are they saying the full story. They were appearing in front of the journalists and documentaries, and they would say only, okay, I was contacted and I helped them to come to this point. I know that they were into something, but I don't know exactly what. And there are people who are saying there is something, but I guess that due to this nature of the investigation, we will not know. We will never find out something truly, something really. And of course, some of these journalists are saying that, and that might be true, of course, that if somebody was, due to this time that passed by more around 30 years, that even some of the perpetrators most likely died. So it's over the people who were behind. So it's very hard to investigate. It's very hard to find any material. All the people who were into this. It's very hard to find anything material evidence and so on. The only thing that we know that from time to time these individuals would fly mostly in Hungary to Budapest, or maybe to fly and then enter illegally Serbia. They were not use their passports or something, and use these channels to come to this to Pale or Lukavica, where the siege was ongoing, or where there was bases sick, and they would use the locals as guides or fixers for a certain position, and who would provide them with weapons and so on. So it basically, we don't know a lot due to this. It's all, it's, it's nobody will, of course, it's what we can only maybe hope for is that somebody will speak of, due to this maybe sense of guilt or something. But I'm not really sure that it might happen in the meantime. So it's still like in many ways questionable thing.
So, how does it compare to other circumstances during the war in Bosnia regarding foreigners who arrived during the war?
Yes. Regarding the foreigners who were in Bosnia during the war, there were several occasions of those people who are coming due to motives and issues. Some of them would join the government forces due to the people who would see the how bad situation was, and some expertise to help the locals who are ill-equipped or ill-trained. But on many of these occasions, there were people who were joined either for thrill or for some other reasons. They were joining militaries or paramilitary groups in Bosnia. Some of them, of course, were those who committed crimes were apprehended and convicted. Some of them, like still at large. One of them, actually, one of the people who was prominent during the siege, who was American, who joined the Bosnian Serbs, the rebels, all the people who were besieging the city. He eventually ended up in Donbass, in this eastern Ukraine, where he has some radio station. And a couple of years ago, he was interviewed and said how he ended up in the war in Bosnia, how he joined one paramilitary unit. He actually joined because one of the person who was heading paramilitary units during the war in war in Balkans was called Captain Dragan, and he was actually a person of Serb origin but born in Australia. So he returned during the war in former Yugoslavia. He formed his own paramilitary unit that was partly local, partly international volunteers. And he eventually, so this individual was with him. Then he broke up, joined another unit, and Captain Dragan Vasitkovic actually later returned to Australia, and he was then extradited to Croatia and sentenced for war crimes there. And he's served his sentence. To those other circumstances, of course, it is different, because in many other we had, we knew about the crimes that were committed, but we know, exact names, places, dates. So there was a ability and possibility to prosecute, find the perpetrators, and punish them. So some of these people were found, punished, and prosecuted in many other countries. Like, for example, from the Germany, where some of these people were found and prosecuted and sentenced there, Sweden, Netherlands, and many other circumstances. Several other people were forcibly returned to Bosnia and prosecuted, and we had on several distant occasions one citizen of Sweden who was sentenced in Sweden for the crimes in Bosnia. And on 2 or 3 occasions they had several others. So most of the participants of the war who were foreigners either had some connection with the Bosnia or with the former Yugoslavia, but on several occasions they were really people who came to fight for some unspecific reason. One of the issues about this Sarajevo Safari issues is that these are the individuals who are not connected to any way to the fight in any way that they support it as a political or something that they had interest for any side. For these were just persons who were completely uninterested about on who were they shooting for with who they were at the time. For them, it was basically a thrill, like a hunting trip, like something like an experience, and for those information that are now circulating, they just acted as such. Well, these were basically the mentality of the people that fight. The term safari is like for those people who go for a hunt in Africa for this, as they call, for the elephants, lions, and these very rare animals. So that makes, I think even more horrifying in many ways that somebody come and kills a human being just for a thrill because it's opportunity to do it and use their circumstances and be unpunished for that.
Okay, so what are the global problems that we might reflect it in this case?
The global issue is, of course, that first of all, inability and the fact that many countries are, in the 90s, there was this still, when the war was happening in Bosnia, it was still like a overreaction, like people wanted to prosecute the war criminals. There was this small movement of the whole world, the UN was for it, Security Council was forming these tribunals and sending investigators and so on. Now you have this, first and foremost, in the whole world, there is this complete, I would say, kind of an apathy that nobody's really interested for the suffering of the people in the whole world, at least in some places, like there is some interest for the war and war crimes in Ukraine, but if you speak about Palestine, Sudan, Yemen, there is basically no interest. Like at least in Europe, it's like it's basically known. It's only on the level of verbal condemnation. So if there is no international cooperation, if there is no international help in those things, and if the people know that they could just, hide their tracks, do this, and know that they will never be, punished, this is very hard to expect it. And we'll see how this investigation in Italy will hold out. Will they be able to find somebody? Will they be able to find somebody who will speak about it? Even the people who might be like, let's say suspects, they know that there is no material evidences, to hold up against them. So it's basically if they stay silent, they will not be, brought to justice. So it's something that remains horrible in some ways. There was a couple, a decade ago, there was this due to this, but that was for another phenomenon of these people who were, joining ISIL in Syria, so committing crimes. There was something to do about it because the whole world saw that there's a security threat. So it's even that is basically because everybody was afraid. What about after these citizens came back to our countries, what they might do this and so on here. But on these circumstances, you see this kind of a complete apathy. So it's, unfortunately, many countries do react, and international community only if they perceive and see it is in their own interest. So this issue remains open because of there is no interest in anyone to do something about it. And of course, how can we speak about it it becomes strange to speak about the war crimes, committed 30 years ago, but when we have it committed right now, and nobody speaks about it, every day from Sudan to Gaza, and it becomes like strange. We'll see. Maybe this kind of maybe we'll have a new momentum. Maybe hopefully the shift in international public and in opinion there will be some change and something better will come out.
So really, I do realize that it's too hard to talk about that, and I want to end this interview with this question. No, how that the Safari case has come to light? What is the impact on the victims' families? Is legal and psychological support available for them?
For the victims, it became like in a sense of way more, I would say, a level of a catalyst change, because many of those, especially parents of the children killed during the siege, start speaking more and more about it. I mean, and they have been committed for some of the issues, mostly of memorializing it. So not far away from here in where I sit, there is this room of that's kind of we have a memorial for the children killed during the siege of Sarajevo, but we have something very specific close by. Parents said that they know that as time passed by, there will be nobody who would have the personal connection for the victims, for the children. So they made this small museum where everybody donated some personal item of their kids, shoes, T-shirts, and so on. So they are kind of with the photos kept in this way of physical remembrance, in a way that you can not only that they are not only names and numbers, and the victims do receive some, of course, help as in the sense of the social care of them financially that they can receive, and those who are willing, they can ask for, of course, psychological help and so on. So there is assistance for them provided through the special healthcare. And one of the issues, maybe that's kind of a specific for Bosnia as well, that we have. It's in the first country in the world that recognized the children born during the war as a product of a rape as a civilian victims of war. Because in several instances we had in Bosnia several very notorious camps that were basically rape camps for the women who were held there. And so there was this very great push for their rights and their visibilities and their acknowledgement. So they are entitled for a financial compensation, and they due to their specific status are recognized as civilian victims of a war.
So hvala vam, Edin. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation despite this very sad and painful topic. Hopefully we see each other in your country, in your welcoming country.
Thank you. You're more than welcome, and hopefully we'll meet soon in a much nicer and better circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Many thanks also to the attendees, and please continue watching the program, and we will see you in the next interview. Thank you.
Goodbye.